Scylla. The strongest monster in the Odyssey was not something Odysseus could kill, trick, or even fight. Circe described her as an immortal evil hiding inside a cave high above a narrow sea passage. From that cave came 6 long necks, each ending in a head filled with 3 rows of teeth. Beneath them were 12 misshapen feet, while her voice sounded less like a woman or a dragon than a pack of newborn dogs barking from inside the rock. Every ship that passed beneath her lost men. She did not attack the vessel itself. She selected sailors from the deck, one for every mouth, and lifted them away before anyone could reach them. Odysseus immediately asked the question he always asked. Could he arm himself and fight back? Circe told him not to try. Scylla could not be defeated, and stopping to attack her would only give the monster time to strike again. The only way through was to row quickly and accept that 6 men were already dead. And before Scylla takes the first man from the deck, if you enjoy mythology told this way, subscribe. The button is right below. Back to Scylla. Odysseus did not warn his crew. If they knew 6 of them had been chosen in advance, panic might stop them from rowing. He stood on deck in armor anyway, holding 2 spears and watching the cliff. Scylla struck so quickly that he only saw his 6 strongest men already hanging above the ship, kicking in the air and calling his name as the heads carried them toward the cave. Homer calls it the most pitiful sight Odysseus witnessed at sea. Later myths made Scylla a beautiful nymph transformed through jealousy, sometimes by Circe and sometimes by Amphitrite. Homer gives her no comforting origin. Odysseus survived not because he found a weakness, but because he sailed past while she ate the 6 men he had decided not to warn. Charybdis. Scylla took 6 sailors. Charybdis could take the entire sea. She lived on the opposite side of the same strait, beneath a dark fig tree growing from the rock. 3 times each day, she swallowed the water around her. Ships, wreckage, men, and the bottom of the sea were dragged into a black whirlpool of sand and mud. Then she vomited the water back out in a tower of foam. Circe gave Odysseus a choice between the 2 monsters, but it was not a choice between victory and defeat. Sailing near Scylla guaranteed 6 deaths. Sailing near Charybdis risked every man and the ship itself. Odysseus chose the monster that killed in smaller numbers. He escaped the first passage, but Charybdis waited for him again after Zeus destroyed his final ship. Odysseus' crew had killed the sacred cattle of Helios, and Zeus answered with a thunderbolt that shattered the vessel and drowned everyone except him. Odysseus tied the mast and keel together and drifted back toward the strait. When Charybdis swallowed the wreckage beneath him, he jumped and caught the roots of the fig tree. He hung above the whirlpool for hours, unable to climb and unable to let go. When the broken timbers finally rose again, he dropped onto them and paddled away with his hands. Homer barely treats Charybdis as a person. She is hunger given a place on the map. Scylla could be survived by sacrificing 6 men. Charybdis could only be survived by hanging above her mouth until she returned what she had swallowed. The Laestrygonians. No creatures in the Odyssey destroyed more of Odysseus' army in less time. 11 of his 12 ships entered a natural harbor surrounded by high cliffs. The entrance was narrow, the water was calm, and the crews tied their vessels close together along the shore. Odysseus alone distrusted the place. He left his own ship outside and sent 3 men inland to find the inhabitants. The scouts met a young woman who directed them to the palace of her father, King Antiphates. Inside, they found his wife, a woman described as enormous as a mountain. She called her husband. Antiphates entered, seized one of the visitors, and prepared him as a meal. The other 2 escaped, but the king raised an alarm across the city. The cliffs filled with giant cannibals. They tore stones from the heights and dropped them onto the trapped fleet. Hulls split against one another. Men jumped into the water, where the giants speared them like fish and carried the bodies home to eat. The harbor that looked safe was built like a killing jar. Its narrow entrance prevented escape, while the cliffs placed the Laestrygonians above every ship. Odysseus survived only because his suspicion had kept his vessel outside. He cut the cable and ordered his men to row while every other ship was crushed behind them. Troy had required 10 years, thousands of soldiers, and the largest Greek army ever assembled. The Laestrygonians destroyed 11 ships in minutes, because almost everyone had parked in the wrong harbor. Polyphemus. The most famous monster in the Odyssey was also the one Odysseus defeated twice, first with intelligence and then with his own pride. Polyphemus belonged to the Cyclops, giant shepherds who lived without laws, assemblies, or concern for strangers. They were not the divine craftsmen who forged Zeus's thunderbolt and other myths. Homer's Cyclops lived separately in caves, each ruling his own household. Odysseus entered Polyphemus' cave with 12 men and found cheese, lambs, and jars of milk. His crew wanted to steal what they could and leave. Odysseus refused. He wanted to meet the owner and receive the guest gift expected under Greek hospitality. Polyphemus returned, rolled a stone across the entrance that the entire crew could not move, and ate 2 men. By the following evening, 6 were dead. Odysseus could not kill him while he slept because the stone would trap everyone inside. Instead, he gave the Cyclops powerful wine and said his name was Nobody. When Polyphemus collapsed, the survivors heated an olive wood stake and drove it into his single eye. His screams brought the neighboring Cyclops, but when they asked who was attacking him, he answered that nobody was killing him. They left. At dawn, Polyphemus felt the backs of his sheep as they exited. Odysseus tied his men beneath the animals and escaped. The plan worked until Odysseus sailed away and shouted his real name. Polyphemus then asked his father, Poseidon, to punish the man who had blinded him. Odysseus escaped the cave because he called himself Nobody. He spent the next 10 years suffering because he could not remain nobody. Circe. The most dangerous transformation in the Odyssey began with a warm meal. Circe lived on the island of Odyssey in a stone palace surrounded by wolves and lions. The animals did not attack visitors. They behaved like pets because her magic had broken their natural instincts. When half of Odysseus' remaining crew reached the palace, Circe welcomed them inside and mixed cheese, barley, honey, wine, and drugs into a drink. The potion made them forget their homeland. Then she struck them with her wand. Their bodies changed into pigs. Their heads, voices, hair, and limbs became those of animals, but their human minds remained trapped inside. Circe drove them into a pen and threw acorns onto the ground. Only Eurylochus, who had suspected a trap and stayed outside, escaped to warn Odysseus. On the road to the palace, Hermes gave Odysseus a plant called moly that made Circe's poison useless. Odysseus drank the potion, felt nothing, and drew his sword when she raised the wand. Circe understood that he was the man Hermes had predicted would resist her. She offered peace, but Odysseus forced her to swear that she would not harm him. Circe restored the pigs, making the men human again. What should have been a quick rescue became an entire year. The crew ate, drank, and rested until one of the men reminded Odysseus that Ithaca still existed. Circe then explained how to reach the dead and survive the Sirens, Scylla, Charybdis, and the Cattle of Helios. The witch who erased his men's humanity became the guide who kept the survivors human long enough to continue, the Sirens. The Odyssey never says they were mermaids. Homer does not describe fishtails, beautiful faces, or even exactly how many sirens there were. Ancient Greek art usually gave them the bodies of birds and the heads of women. What Homer describes clearly is the ground around them, a green meadow covered with human bones and skin rotting from the bodies of sailors who listened too long. Their weapon was not simple beauty. It was knowledge. The Sirens promised Odysseus that they knew everything the Greeks and Trojans had suffered during the war and everything happening across the earth. For a man whose greatest strength was curiosity, that promise was more dangerous than seduction. Circe warned him that anyone who heard the song would never return home. Odysseus still wanted to hear it. He pressed softened beeswax into every sailor's ears and ordered them to tie him upright against the mast. If he begged or commanded them to release him, they were to tighten the ropes. As the ship approached, the wind stopped, and the Sirens sang directly to him. Odysseus pulled so violently that the ropes cut into his body. He demanded freedom, but the deaf crew added more knots and continued rowing. Later stories claimed the Sirens were destined to die if a man heard them and escaped. Homer gives Odysseus no such victory. He simply leaves them behind. The Sirens did not offer love or safety. They offered the one thing Odysseus could never stop wanting, an answer to every question at the cost of never going home. Calypso, the creature who held Odysseus the longest, did not need chains, teeth, or poison. Calypso was an immortal nymph, a daughter of Atlas, who lived alone on the hidden island of Ogygia. Her cave was surrounded by cedar, cypress, violets, springs, and birds. Even Hermes stopped to admire it. To anyone arriving from the sea, the island looked like paradise. Odysseus arrived after losing his ship and every remaining companion. Calypso rescued him, fed him, shared her bed with him, and refused to let him leave for 7 years. She offered immortality. If Odysseus stayed, he would never age and never die. Penelope would grow old, while Calypso remained beautiful forever. The offer should have ended his journey. Instead, Homer shows Odysseus sitting beside the shore, staring toward an empty horizon and crying. At night, he returned to Calypso's cave because he had no choice. By day, he mourned the mortal life waiting beyond the sea. Athena finally complained to Zeus, who sent Hermes with an order for his release. Calypso obeyed and helped Odysseus build a raft, gather food, and find the winds that would carry him away. She was not monstrous in appearance, and she had saved him from death. She was dangerous because her prison contained everything except consent and home. Odysseus rejected eternal youth for the chance to return to a wife who had aged 20 years without him. The Lotus Eaters. The first supernatural threat Odysseus met after Troy did not attack anyone. The Lotus Eaters welcomed strangers, offered them food, and harmed none of the scouts sent to investigate their island. Their fruit simply removed the reason to leave. Odysseus sent 3 men inland, Each tasted the honey-sweet lotus and immediately forgot the purpose of the voyage. They did not lose their names, become violent, or fall unconscious. They understood that ships and companions were waiting. They just stopped caring. Ithaca, family, duty, and the years already spent trying to return became less important than eating another piece of fruit. That made the lotus different from every later danger. Polyphemus trapped men inside a cave. Circe trapped human minds inside animal bodies. Calypso trapped Odysseus on an island. The lotus made captivity feel like a decision. Odysseus could not argue his men back into wanting their old lives. He dragged them to the shore while they cried, tied them beneath the rowing benches, and ordered the crew to leave before anyone else tasted the fruit. Homer never explains whether the Lotus Eaters were mortal or supernatural. They may not be monsters at all. After 10 years of war, the easiest way to defeat exhausted soldiers was not to kill them. It was to offer peace without memory. Every later creature tried to prevent Odysseus from reaching home. The Lotus Eaters almost succeeded by making home stop mattering. The spirits of the dead. Odysseus did not enter the underworld like Heracles. Following Circe's instructions, he sailed to the edge of ocean, dug a trench, poured offerings into it, and sacrificed a ram and a black ewe. The smell of blood brought the dead out of Erebus. They arrived in crowds, brides, young men, elders, girls, and warriors still carrying the wounds that killed them. Most were only shadows. They had no strength, no solid bodies, and almost no memory of who they had been. To speak clearly, a spirit had to drink the sacrificial blood. Odysseus stood over it with his sword and controlled which dead person was allowed to become conscious. He spoke with Elpenor, the crewman who had died after getting drunk and falling from Circe's roof. Then came Tiresias, who explained how the voyage could still end. Odysseus met his mother and tried 3 times to embrace her. Each time his arms passed through her like a dream. He also spoke with Agamemnon, Achilles, and Ajax. Achilles, the greatest fighter at Troy, said he would rather serve as the poorest living laborer than rule over all the dead. Eventually, the spirits became too numerous. Odysseus feared Persephone might send the head of the Gorgon from deeper inside Hades, so he fled to the ship. The dead could not touch him, but they surrounded the only substance that allowed them to remember life. Odysseus entered their world carrying a pool of blood, and every ghost wanted to turn to become human again. The Cattle of Helios. The final creatures Odysseus' men harmed looked completely harmless. On the island of Thrinacia, the sun god kept 7 herds of cattle and 7 flocks of sheep, 50 animals in each. They did not reproduce, never grew old, and never became fewer. Helios' daughters watched over them. Tiresias had warned Odysseus about the island. Circe warned him again. If the crew left the animals untouched, they could still reach home. If they killed even one, their ship and every man aboard would be destroyed. Odysseus wanted to sail past, but Eurylochus persuaded the exhausted crew to land for one night. A storm trapped them for an entire month, and their supplies disappeared. While Odysseus prayed away from the camp, the gods put him to sleep. Eurylochus told the men that starvation was the worst death, and that it was better to sacrifice the finest cattle to Helios. They slaughtered the animals. Then the signs began. The empty hides crawled across the ground. Meat on the spits made the sound of living cattle. Helios learned what had happened and demanded punishment, threatening to take the sun into the underworld if Zeus refused. When the ship finally left, Zeus darkened the sky and struck it with a thunderbolt. The vessel broke apart, and every member of the crew drowned. Odysseus alone had not eaten the meat. The sacred cattle never attacked anyone. They killed the final crew because their owner was powerful enough to make disobedience fatal. The monsters of the Odyssey were not all beasts. Some had 6 mouths, some looked human, some offered food, love, knowledge, or immortality. Odysseus survived because the safest-looking creatures were often the ones that made escape feel unnecessary.